Now we're going to install the Davidson Audio fairing shroud that we make in-house for the Indian Challenger. What this does is it is installed underneath the windshield motor in this tray all the way across to help protect your aftermarket audio equipment like the amplifiers, because with Indians we have a electric motor that goes up and down, and at this point there's two arms that help stabilize the windshield. So where these arms are is there's a giant opening. You can see it once the window motor's up, you can look straight down. And right here on the clutch side and where this factory power unit is over here is where we put our DSPs or aftermarket amplifiers in this location, which leaves the equipment susceptible to weather due to the two arms. So with our fairing shroud, it goes all the way across this, and right in this location is where the arms are, which this is now underneath it. So when that water comes down, it'll hit this material, it'll beat off the front and put the water down here now. So let's go ahead, get the front of this bike torn down and get this shroud installed. Let's go over what is here and what's on the fairing tray. So starting from the left side or the brake side, this is the GPS antenna. So if you have a Dark Horse or the Premium, you have this module along with this module. So this is either the GPS antenna or the cellular antenna. This wire runs up to the head unit, and then the other wire runs down, snake's cross comes to here, and this is the actual module that goes back to the head unit and gives you your GPS, navigation, and so forth. This module right here is for your window motor. So before we go disassembling this and removing things off the fairing tray, we're going to go ahead and put the window motor all the way up, so that way it'll still operate, because we're going to take all this off. And over here on the brake side, this silver box with the heat sinks, this is the factory power unit that Indian has, and this is what takes the audio signal from the ride command 7-inch, goes to this and sends it out to your speaker locations. We're also going to be removing that because we won't be using it anymore. That's where one of our amplifiers is going to go, and right here's where the second one's going to go. So real quick note on this connector, as you can see, there is this locking tab. So when you go to pull it off, you're going to push this all the way out, which will then release the actual tab that you can press and disconnect. For the actual antenna, it's just a quick disconnect. We're actually going to pull this down. There's little tabs underneath here that just kind of routes itself in. So to continue on, we're just going to unplug the windshield motor now and get that plug up out of our way. This harness right here is for the rear audio. This is what the head unit sends its signal for the rear, and then the output goes to your saddlebags. Sometimes these pins will actually work where you can unscrew it, but a lot of times it's plastic on plastic. You just got to pry them out. So what I used was a really fine flathead screwdriver, just got in there enough just to pull it out. This has a push style. We're gonna pull this out of the little tab. So this connector, there's one harness here that plugs in underneath the tray. This is for an optional module. This is your driving light module, if you were to upgrade to those. So we're just going to pull this. You have two connectors plugged into the factory power unit. This is going to be one end that we use in my harness that I make. This is for your front signal, in and out. This is for your tour pack speakers. And I'd be lying to you if I've looked into what this little 3-pin connector is. this module is just stuck on here, so you just gotta pry that off. We might reuse that just depending on how sticky it still is, but usually we just replace this with some new 3M double-sided tape. On that one, we're just gonna cut the zip tie. We're gonna take a 5mm, we're gonna zip these on out, and we're gonna pull this tray off. And like I said, we have this one last connector, which usually these have a release on them. Just like that, we have our fairing tray off. We won't be using this one because in the audio package, we send you one that's pre-modified with the DSP already on it. Let's continue with disassembling everything to get that fairing shroud on. Let's go ahead and take the factory power unit out. It's just a simple 10mm bolt here. It's time to get the windshield pulled off. So you're gonna remove these 5 4mm bolts. Now remember, I'll show you in a second, there is a flat style, I don't know what you call it, a T-nut on the back side, and there's a groove in there, so when you tighten this, it sucks it in that groove and holds it. And like I said, it's got the nut welded on a flat plate, so when it goes in that groove, it locks it right on into place. Now that the windshield is off the bike, we're gonna go ahead and remove this bolt with the nut, and then these 2 bolts up here. These bolts are all 5mm with a 10mm nut on the front side. For me, I just, like I said before, some of these, I just put right on back. Now we've got to take off the hood. Now, some people get a little frightened on this because it feels pretty hard, but what I do is you can do from the back side, you grab up here, you just brace yourself and you simply pull up. So you can see there's 2 tab pockets here and then the 2 tabs. These 2 tabs go in here, and then you can see the clip and the clip here, and that's how this goes in here. It pivots and snaps down. 2, 4, 6, 7 5mm screws that we have to remove to pop this off. To release this, there's a push clip style right about here and here, and then there's more up here, and then when we pop this up, we kind of have to push it forward because it kind of locks itself in the back. So gently, there's one. Okay, so now that we got we forgot the middle one. Now that they're all out, this simply comes off. Now that we get to this point, you can see everything that's going on here. So these are the arms I was talking about earlier. As you can see, there's clearance here for them to move up and down, and where we're putting our audio equipment is 1 amplifier here and 1 here. So you can see where this big opening slit would be problematic. To continue this install, we're gonna remove the windshield motor. We're gonna pull this off because that's kind of where our fairing shroud's gonna go. 4mm again, and zip these 3 screws out. Before we go installing the new fairing shroud, what we need to do is this wiring harness right here naturally goes here, but with our amplifier here, we need all the extra room we can get. So you can simply just pull this on off. There's a simple little clip here. We're just gonna snip both these zip ties because we'll be putting a new one on. Put this above the fairing shroud because we have to move this harness right on the inside here and zip tie it to this support bracket here. There's plenty of clearance for the travel of the motor. My bikes, I've had mine on here for about 2 years just to make sure this is going to clear and work, and it does just fine. What you can do if you want, you can unplug the motor to get it out of your way. Just that simple plug. Then from here, so you got this harness is going to wrap right around there with that. So take this fairing shroud, route it right across here and here. The first part that you want to worry yourself about is the mounting holes. You just got to move this around. There you go. And you just got to find all the mounting holes, because that's what's going to dictate where all of this shroud lines up to. So don't concern yourself with where everything is just yet. Go ahead and focus on these holes first. Window motor back on here. Loosely do it just before snug. That way we can move the fairing shroud around a little bit. You want to pull the fairing shroud a little bit to center up on these holes. So while this one's centered right here, we're going to go ahead and tighten up this side right here. So right there. All right. So now that we have these two holes exposed how we want them, this is where the top tray bolts down in. What we can do is we can route the windshield motor connector back, tuck it up out of the way, because that will get zip tied up with this other harness once we bring it back here. So put our first zip tie right there. There's our zip tie. Little zip tie gun on there, down here, just to keep this harness together, because there is another loose wire with this bundle. And the zip tie gun cuts those nice and flush, so you're not worrying about cutting yourself later on them. Once we bolt these two down, we'll run a zip tie over this and underneath that, the zip tie, so it'll suck this as close as we can, allowing all that travel. I'm here for the top tray piece, the fairing tray holder, and then this. So when we go to put this back on, the key is going to be lining up the two outer parts and these two push down spots, because that's what secures this fairing shroud. So really we have 5 points of contact in the middle, these two out here with these two and two. So that helps keep this fairing tray nice and secure. As you can see now, where the window motor arms go, the water will come here, will either beat off here or out the back. All right, before we go assembling everything back, we take the upper fairing tray, that's what I'm gonna call this, and we're gonna flip it over, because these two sets of tabs, we wanna grind these completely flat, because right here is where those amplifiers go up in and they end up contacting this plastic. So if we remove this now, it'll just give us extra clearance. And now, just to clarify, it's just these two thin tabs right here. That'll give us a little bit more clearance. So to do that, I'm going to use, I have a miniature or a smaller version of the oscillating tool. Just gonna zip those right on off, and then we can go and get this installed right back on the bike. And then the last thing I like to do is just take a razor knife, or I like to use the Alpha knives, and just clean this up a little bit. Just make it nice and smooth. And just like that, we now have a nice smooth bottom, which will give us that extra clearance for the amplifiers. All right, now that our upper fairing piece has been modified right here, and we got our fairing shroud on, now it's time to carefully put this back on. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna set it up here, pull the arms up, and this is where, one, that harness has got to get pushed back in, but you're gonna wanna carefully make sure that the fairing shroud is in all of the locations, which this takes a little bit of finesse. All right, now that it's nice and snug, just verify that the fairing shroud is underneath that tab, that you got it caught in here. It is now time to put all the screws back in to hold this. Now we can go ahead and put our hood back on. Simply put it on in the pivot points, push down, and just... Now let's go ahead and get the window frame back on. I like to set this on here and run the long bolt through first. You don't need to go He-Man with it on this, so that's plenty. And then here, if you remember, it's the 5mm with the 10mm socket. I like to start by taking all the hardware and just setting it right here. And then the first one I like to do is the center, because then it just makes it a little easier. So I just do that, take our 4mm Allen, put it in there, take the T-nut, find the track on the back side, and just finger tighten it. Don't go too tight. So the last thing you want to do once you've had all this put together, or I would even suggest before you put the window frame back on, is just, I forgot. So is you're going to take your zip tie, you're going to go between the window motor track and this harness, and you're going to feed it down and up. That way it comes in behind the stud. And then you're going to take your zip tie right there, and you're just going to pull this harness towards it. And I even like to do 2 of them, but what we're going to do is we're going to get the zip tie gun in there. This one we're going to go up a little bit higher. And now push the zip tie cutoff tabs up towards here. And now we've got our clearance. It looks really tight, but I promise this will move up and down and clear it. So just to verify before you go finishing your install, plug your window motor in, let it cycle up and down, make sure it clears that, and you'll be good to go. So now we're finished here. Let's go on and get to the next task.